Elections continue to trail the state pardon granted to 8 Nigerians by the National Council of State, headed by President Goodluck Jonathan. On Law Weekly today, we talked to Professor Itse Sagay, who at one time represented in court the former Bayelsa State Governor, Dipriye Alamesia, and he has some interesting perspectives on the issue. We'll get to that conversation in a bit, but first up, a quick recap of the activities in the courts. I am Shola Shuyeli. The week started with an indefinite industrial action by federal judicial workers to press on their demand for improved wages. Following an emergency national delegates conference of the Judiciary Staff Union, which held in Minna, Niger State on the 5th of March, the workers resolved to embark on the strike with effect from Monday, the 11th of March, if no frantic effort was made to resolve the issues of the non-implementation of their consolidated salary structure. The strike on Monday successfully paralyzed activities in all the federal courts in Abuja, Nigeria's federal capital city. The Supreme, Appeal and federal courts were all short, and the few workers who had reported for duty were locked out. On Tuesday, the 12th of March, the federal courts, which had remained open on Monday, were shut after the union leaders in the state enforced the directives of the Judicial Staff Union. Workers at the Court of Appeal, the National Industrial Court, and the Federal High Court in Lagos were all sent home. After the union leaders succeeded in shutting the federal courts in their different states, the Chief Registrar of the Supreme Court, Mr. Sunday Olorundaunsi, made an appeal to members of the Judiciary Staff Union to return to work. He assured them that their grievances were being addressed at the highest levels of authorities concerned. The Chief Registrar told the striking workers that the Chief Justice of Nigeria, Honorable Justice Mariam Aloma Mukhtar, remained highly committed to finding solutions to the age-long problem of strike within the judiciary. At about 10:30 p.m. on Tuesday night, the industrial action was finally called off. However, most of the court workers were unaware, and the federal courts remained largely deserted on Wednesday, with activities resuming fully on Thursday. The Federal High Court in Port Harcourt, Rivers State, however, did sit the day after the strike was called off. Justice Lambo Akombi, who had earlier in February ordered that the federal government should pay residents of Odi community 37.6 billion naira compensation, rejected an application by the government seeking a stay of execution of the judgment, pending its appeal. The court gave the order while ruling on a 100 billion naira suit filed by the people of Odi who were seeking compensation and justice. 12 policemen were reportedly killed by armed gangs based in Odi on the 5th of November 1999, and the Olusegun Obasanjo administration then deployed soldiers to the town on the 20th of November 1999. 3 days later, the town was completely left in ruins, and several Odi residents were killed and property destroyed by the soldiers. The judge in her ruling then had described the action of the federal government and its soldiers as genocidal and insisted that the federal government must make the payments. The strike action did not, however, affect the state and magistrate courts, and so the legal practitioner Ajibola Aribisala, whose rank of Senior Advocate of Nigeria (SAN) was recently withdrawn by the Legal Practitioners Privileges Committee (LPPC), took the opportunity to advance his case, challenging the committee's decision to deprive him the use of the SAN rank. In a suit filed before the Lagos High Court Igboshire, Mr. Aribisala listed Fidelity Bank PLC and the LPPC as defendants. The lawyer is asking the court for an order of mandatory injunction directing immediate restoration of parties in the suit to the status quo, pending the hearing and determination of the substantive suits challenging the action of the LPPC. The trial court has adjourned the matter to the 23rd of April.
You see, life has just got easier. You stay connected to Channels TV, where news and innovations are shaping our world. Simply log on to channelstv.com to get the breaking news. Browse the homepage according to what matters to you. Tap on the extended coverage of business, sports, politics, lifestyle, infotech, entertainment, health, world news, and lots more. Click on the live link and see the news in real time. Do you want to watch the latest video of the day? It's just a click away. Friend us on Facebook, YouTube, follow us on Twitter, Google+, participate in Channels TV poll and share your comments. It's a website you can talk to. Your voice will be heard.
channelstv.com.
The news at your fingertips.
Welcome back. Now, there's been a lot of reactions trailing the recent exercise of discretion by the president in granting 8 Nigerians pardon. The reactions are as diverse as the different commentators, and here's a few of them.
My take on it really is that we are commenders in this country. And this is just a Nollywood script. Because it is not enough for you to say, Governor Lamisi has been granted pardon, so has been granted pardon. Ordinarily, these things are possible, but there must be a basis for it. There is a conviction. What is the reason for all this pardon? Why is it that the man who has actually stolen a tube of yam and convicted and is currently in incarceration in Kirikiri and has actually repented and is remorseful, not being a beneficiary of this pardon? Why is it that anytime we hear of plea bargaining and pardon, it's actually high-profile criminals? It's not a question of whether it's political, or it's economic, or it's social. Once there is a conviction and a sentence, it comes to play. And until you have appealed that decision, and that decision is set aside, you are a convict under the law. And if you have to be granted a state pardon, it is not something that you have to be done just like that. Governor Lamisi here, X has been granted pardon, General has been granted pardon. Nigerians demand to know the reasons. Why has pardon been granted to these people? Is it that posthumously there has been some spiritual influence on the governance that has actually upped the level of governance in this country? Or is it that there has been some positive influence that these people have impacted on the Nigerian polity? If that has not been done, I think this is just it. We are all witnessing a theater of the absurd.
Former Governor Lamisi was convicted on corruption-related, charges. And you know how Nigerians feel about corruption, the way it is now. Everybody has, very strong feelings that this corruption is one factor that is militating against our developmental process. A lot of people do not find difficulty about accepting the pardon granted to others who are said to have committed largely political offenses. And indeed, pardon in such circumstances can be understood because largely some of those offenses are largely politically motivated. But in the case of DPA Aribisala, is something that a lot of people, including myself, find it difficult to accept, given the fact that the commitment of the government to the fight against corruption, and the fact that we are signatories to major international instruments against corruption. A lot of people are likely to interpret it as a major setback against the fight against corruption. But from the president's perspective, President Goodluck Ebele Jonathan, one can say by that, perhaps from his own personal perspective, it is understandable. The former governor was a former boss to the president of the country. And given the George Orwellian principle that ultimately man serves no other interest other than his own. So one can then situate it, look at it from that premise. But the question to ask is this, is that pardon largely in the national interest? I think it is not in the national interest. And I think this is why it is worrisome.
People before now have accused government of being insincere in the fight against corruption. But even that little credit that government had been given before now had been destroyed by this singular act. One can then envision that in a short while, other persons that fall in the category of Depre Alamesea, and I'm talking about Tafa Balogu and Bode George, will soon be granted that kind of pardon, because what is good for the source must be good for the gander in Goodluck Jonathan's presidency. As a matter of fact, there is a way in which those persons can then enforce their rights against being discriminated against by saying, why should you grant pardon to a fellow Bayesian while we are left, in a manner of speaking. So it's very sad. And sadder still is the insensitive and very arrogant attempt that has been made by this presidency to justify it.
Now, I went looking for Professor Itse Sagay to get his views, especially on some of the recent legal issues that cropped up. And I found out during the interview that at some point the former Bayelsa governor was his client. But here's the conversation we had. Let me start by getting your reactions. I know I've read some of the things that you've said in the media, but for the benefit of our viewers who, have not had the privilege of reading you, I know that you've made some comments, but let me start by getting your reactions to the pardon granted to the former governor of Bayelsa State and 7 others by the president.
Well, there are two sets of pardons, I would say. One has to do with the alleged coup plot against Abacha, and the other, the case of Alamasia, against the misappropriation of funds in Bayelsa. Now, with regard to the first set, there's certainly no problem at all, because in my view, they were doing a favor to the country by trying to overthrow a monster regime that was destroying the country and at the same time making us an international pariah. Nigerians could no longer participate in many things abroad. I even experienced that when I traveled. So it was a great relief, and I wish they had succeeded. So I think those persons are absolutely entitled to the pardon they had, although there's some argument now whether they were not already pardoned or whether this is a double pardon. In the case of Alamasia, I'm very surprised at the type of rush to judgment that is going on. The whole criticism of what the government has done, in my view, is vindictive and totally lacks objectivity and rationality. Why do I say so? Alamasia committed an offense, and to get him to be punished, because at that time when these allegations were made against him, some of us said, since a governor is entitled to immunity, why not wait for him to complete his term and arrest him? Before you move against him. But the powers that be at that time, Obasanjo particularly, would not wait for that. He was just too impatient to exact his pound of flesh. So what did he do? He organized an illegal and unconstitutional removal from office. That I know. Everything about the removal of Alamasia was absolutely illegal. It was a work of brigands, not state officials. It was brigandry. It was illegal, absolutely offensive to all parameters of the rule of law. So his removal was illegal. That happened. After removal, he was humiliated, handcuffed, taken away, and then the trial took place. He was then sentenced. He was convicted. He was sentenced. He served his sentence. He lost some of his assets, part of the plea bargain. He served his sentence and then was released. So he has paid his price to society. And there's no reason why people should continue to hound him endlessly, as if they had wanted him to die in prison. If he didn't die in prison to please anybody, that's no reason why they should become so irrational in their reaction. These people who are saying somebody who has paid for his offense to the state, has fully paid for it, and has come out, those who are saying he should not be granted pardon, have completely turned their backs on all the existing cases that we know where there has been no proper trial. We know of numerous governors who have been accused of the same misappropriation of funds in their states. They have merely been charged to court, and after that, granted bail. They are now senators. They are also holding all sorts of positions all over the country, and carrying on as if nothing has happened. We know of a case, in fact, in which there is a permanent injunction against any agency from arresting or trying him. We know that. We know Halliburton. We know Wilbur's scam. We know Siemens scam. Halliburton scam involved over 80 public officers who were given amounts of money. This has been published, their names published, the amounts they got published. Nothing has been done. So what I'm saying is that we should concentrate our efforts in, one, detecting cases of corruption that have not been detected, prosecuting those that have been detected to the end and getting conviction, and making sure after the conviction that they are sentenced and spend their time in prison.
Now, Prof, are we saying that, well, despite all those cases that you mentioned of prosecution still being pending against some other looters, that two wrongs make a right, can we honestly say that the president's action was exercised in the best interest of the Nigerian people? Because there are those who say when he took oath of office, he swore that he would abide by the Constitution. He swore that he would abide by the provisions of fundamental principles and directives of state policy as contained in Chapter 2, Section 15, which says that the state shall abolish all forms of corruption.
Well, you know, one shouldn't look at motive. One should look at the objective factors. One, has he been punished? He has. Has he served his sentence? He has. Well, one can look at other factors too. I hear he has been very central in getting the Niger Delta militants not to be violent, to cooperate with the government in the whole process of resolution of the problem, therefore allowing more petroleum and so on to be exported by Nigeria. I've heard that. But for me, that's not the issue. The Constitution is very clear on that. It's a question of discretion. And in my view, this is a case of discretion well used.
So much has been said about the constitutionality and the powers of the president to grant pardon, but what's the intendment of the drafters of the Constitution on the weight to be attached to the advice of the National Council of State? Is it ceremonial? Is the president bound to take their decision? How does that work?
Yes. If you look at it, it says the president, after consulting with the Council of States, can grant pardon. In my own view, that consultation is not mere, a mere process.
Okay.
It is, for me, it is a substantive issue. In other words, when consulting, the consensus of the council must be in favor of what he's proposing before he can go ahead. He can't say, I consulted because I told them, and then the majority said no, and I will still go ahead. That would be wrong, as far as I'm concerned. It will be against the spirit of that provision.
So in the absence of any of them coming out to say that they didn't give their consent to it, the presumption is that they all gave their consent to it.
There's a presumption. That is the normal process in law. We assume that something is regular when it goes through the normal process until there's evidence that it was not so. And for now, there's no evidence that it was not regular.
For those who criticize the pardon, particularly that granted to the former governor, the belief is that the action sends out a message that there's no commitment on the part of the federal government to the war against graft, especially when you think of the fact that this is a man who has issues abroad. He was said to have fled from justice and back to Nigeria to evade justice, and people think that the government should have been more concerned about the morality of this issue rather than the political or the legality of it.
The issue of morality can be very, very difficult because the morality in this case has many dimensions. I'll give you one aspect of the morality, one dimension. This man, Alamisia, was hospitalized in Germany. He had an operation and left Germany to London to recuperate. He called the then head of state, General Obasanjo, to say, this is what has happened. That one greeted him and, expressed sympathy. At the same time, immediately alerted the London people to say, this guy is coming and you should arrest him on arrival. There's an element of morality in that one. When you are trusted, when somebody has his faith in you, when he has confided in you, and then you betray him to people who are going to take him into custody and put him on and prosecute him. To me, there's an element of morality in that. And personally, I felt very bad about that. No matter what the man has done, let him be, what word do I want to use? The architect of his own fate. In other words, if he stumbles into London and is arrested, fine. But it shouldn't be you to whom he confided, betraying him secretly to an alien power because you do not like him personally. Do you think Obasanjo's, that's another aspect, Obasanjo's hostility to Alamesia was based on Obasanjo's anti-corruption belief? Not at all. Why? Because Alamesia did not respond positively to the third term agenda. So the whole thing is complicated.
But what's the status of the pardon before the international community? Surely he can still be tried for the offenses that are pending.
Oh, definitely. This is a Nigerian pardon,
Okay.
which means as far as Nigeria is concerned, he did not commit any offense. All his former rights are restored to him. But if he steps out of the country to go, say, to England, of course, they will arrest him. He'll be very foolish to go to England.
Now, what's the full effect of this pardon? Does it wipe away the offenses and restore back the former governor to the state where he was before? There are those who say that they won't be surprised in a few days to come, there will be suits in court asking for the recovery of all the assets that he has forfeited.
No, that he cannot get back.
Okay.
He won't get his assets back.
Right.
But because that has already been taken, and it's not part of the pardon at all. It's not part of the pardon. But he can contest elections, for example. He can hold public office again. Things like that. I think it would be very insensitive of him to want to regain those assets, because those assets were seized on the basis that they were procured with state resources and on the basis of a plea bargain agreement. I think that's a thing he should let go permanently.
I know that when we started, you made a distinction between the two categories of those pardons.
Yes.
I wanted to go back to that distinction that you made. There are those who say that in a bid to grant this pardon, especially for the former Bayelsa governor, who is the boss of the president, that the federal government made factual errors. That those people who have, reportedly, that some of them have already been granted pardon, like you mentioned, and then we talked about all those issues of clemency and pardon. But there are those who say that, now, if you have an instrument that has gazetted that clemency at that time, does it not amount to a duplication now, whereby this federal government now comes again and says these people already are getting pardon again?
Well, pardon is higher than clemency.
Okay.
Pardon means wiping away every offense, everything that he did. Clemency will just mean release from detention and do not pursue any further punishment or sentence. But pardon wipes it away as if he never committed the offense. So technically, there is nothing wrong in having pardon after you have been given clemency. You're getting a higher level of forgiveness, if I may put it that way. Yes, there is a difference in substance.
That's our interview and the program this week. No doubt there'll be many more reactions in the days to come. But I thank you for watching. I'm Shola Shayeli. See you next week.